Hi everyone, thank you for joining our webinar today, Enterprise Command Centers on a Cocktail Napkin. Before we get started, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a link to access the recording tomorrow via email. Second, for the duration of the webinar, all participants will be on mute. However, we encourage you to ask questions. If you would like to ask a question, please use the questions box to do so, and we will answer all of the questions at the end of the session. And finally, if you experience any audio or technical difficulties, please use the chat box to let us know so that we can address those issues. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Lilly to get us started.
Welcome. Becky, can we go to the next slide? So my name's Deborah Lilly and I look after customer success in InnoApps, but our presenters today are Pam and Becky, and they're going to go through and explain, go through what ECC is and explain how we can extend that. I'm really looking forward to their content. But first of all, just a little bit about InnoApps. So Becky. Okay, and again, yes. Okay, so this slide is just some data points. I'm not going to go through it. This isn't a marketing session, but you can see that InnoApps is, we're a good sized company and we're global and we do all of the Oracle portfolio. So if we go to the next slide, Becky. What does that actually mean? So it means that we look after customers at any stage of their Oracle journey with any of the Oracle products. So we're deep and wide in the Oracle space. And if there's anything that we can do, either from what you hear today or anything else that you'd like to talk about in Oracle, then just reach out to one of us. We'll have our information at the end of the session. But that's not what we're here about today. Today we're here to hear about ECC and how we can extend that. So over to you, Pam.
Thank you, Deborah. So next slide, please, Becky. So what exactly is ECC? So enterprise command centers are, simply put, they're a series of operational dashboards that help you run your business more effectively and quickly, bigger, better, faster. They allow for your staff to monitor transactional data, to look for issues and efficiencies that can be gained and that sort of thing. And it really helps to answer questions when you don't even know what the questions are. One thing that it's not, and this is a misconception that some folks have, is it's not a C-suite reporting analytics tool. So it's really for your day-to-day staff to be able to make the business run faster and better. It was introduced with EBS 12.2, so it's been around for a while. It's on its own release schedule from EBS, generally speaking, twice a year, usually in April and October. So the last release was in April of this past year, so I would anticipate that the next release, which will be version 11, will be coming out probably next month. It's segregated by module, and the dashboards contain a series of charts and graphs, interactive data details, that really help you to pinpoint where you may have some potential issues to resolve and that sort of thing. And being segregated by modules, that it will have each of the modules then has a series of dashboards associated with it. The ECCs follow the security that you have built in within EBS. So for example, if you have a responsibility that's limited to a specific operating unit, then when you drill from that EBS menu into ECC, then you can only see the information for that particular operating unit. It uses role-based access control, or RBAC, for building out some of that security during the setups, as well as then with the responsibilities. So as of the version 10 that's out right now, there are about 35 command centers available, comprised of 145 dashboards, and that runs the gamut across finance, supply chain, projects, CRM, HCM, and the like. And with each new release, Oracle will create whole new command centers. They will update and add dashboards. They'll include new metrics and so on and so forth. So with this most recent release, for example, they introduced a command center for cash management and then updated dashboards for GL and order management and project accounting and whatnot. So one of the things that I really like about ECC is its relationship with EBS, and it's what I would call kind of mutually backward compatible. So meaning if you're on release 12.2.5 of eBusiness Suite and you decide that you want to implement ECC, you can go out and grab the most recent version and get it installed. It's a series of patches, do all the setups, and you're off and running. You have the standard functionality available right there. Conversely, let's say that you've been running ECC for a while, maybe you're on version 6, you go and you upgrade your EBS environment, that version 6 will still work with the upgraded environment. So you don't have to necessarily do it in lockstep. However, there are some obvious benefits. You may get some new dashboards that you didn't have available before and that sort of thing. And then lastly, it is part of your Oracle EBS licensing automatically. So long as you have a module licensed and if there's an accompanying ECC for it, then you can go ahead and implement it. There's no additional licensing impact with that. So Becky, if you can move forward. So with that, thank you. So with that, you say, okay, that's great. That's standard functionality. I get all these benefits, but can I do more with it? You know, how can it really help me when I have a problem that maybe isn't all within EBS? So in order to best illustrate that, Becky and I were talking about, you know, how can we really give you this story? How can we show this to you? And so we talked about, you know, some of our passions. And as you might be able to tell, Becky is a dyed-in-the-wool Green Bay Packers fan. I happen to love Formula One racing, have since I was a kid, go Scuderia Ferrari. And so we decided, let's create this company and take you on a journey through ECC. And so we developed Sports RS. We're a reseller of licensed merchandise, sporting merchandise. And as part of our licensing agreements globally, with whether it's leagues or specific teams or a combination of both, we do have some royalties that are due to them when we sell these products to our customers. So take, for example, I buy this shirt as a customer. Then as Sports R Us, I have to turn around and pay a royalty to the FIA because I've sold this shirt. Not all of the items that we necessarily sell under the licensing agreements are royalty-based, and so it's just a select few of the items. And additionally, while a lot of the information is available within EBS and you can see via the ECC dashboards, not all of it is. We have some that's also stored in just a homegrown external system. So going a little bit further, I want to paint a story or scenario for you. So Becky, next slide, thanks. So we're reviewing our payables department, and there are some inefficiencies that we'd like to improve upon, some just general process improvements that we'd like to go through. And that includes just making sure that we're paying our invoices in a timely fashion, that we have good cash flow, that we are taking advantage of discounts when we can, working with our vendors as well to speed up that month-end close process, because we all know that's the bane of a lot of people's existence, is trying to close faster. So with the standard ECC within payables, you have, for example, these 4 dashboards. You have the supplier balance that really lets you get in and delve into some detailed invoice issues. You can look at invoices that are on hold. Additionally, you can pull up and look at discounts that are available. So for example, if you have an agreement with a supplier, it says, pay this invoice 10 days early and we'll give you 5% discount, then you can take advantage of that. As well, then with period close, there with a lot of the ECCs, there are dashboards to help with that process so that you can make sure that you're identifying your issues before they really become an issue at the end of the month and be able to resolve them. So that's all the standard features in this example, but what about the royalties? What can we do with ECC to help with our royalties process? So next slide, please, Becky. So can we take ECC? Can we add to it and be able to automate some of the royalties process, make the information more visible to our folks that are actually doing those payments and the like? And the answer is yes, we absolutely can, and it's by using extensions. So there are a couple of different flavors of extensions, and there's basic, which we'll show you here in a second. So there's basic and there's advanced. And using EBS nomenclature, think of basic like forms personalizations, and advanced more like Chemly or Rice objects. So we have listed here a sampling of some of the basic extensibilities that Becky's actually going to show you here in a couple of minutes. The sampling, it's really, I think it's a good representation of what's available. So it's not an exhaustive list, but I think it gives you a good idea. So the first one, the changing in the way a component is visualized, is really about if, for example, you have an item or a component, I should say, that's displayed as a tag cloud and you want to see it as a graph instead, you can go ahead and do that. You can hide and show attributes. That's similar to folder technology within EBS. Excuse me, you can remove existing or add new components. So think of that as moving widgets around, which you may be familiar with doing that. And then removing actions or links, you might want to do that, for example, if you have a segregation of duties concern. You may have a group that is allowed to drill back into EBS and work on the invoices versus another group that maybe they're just allowed to be aware of the invoice. You remove that linkage, they can't drill back in. So that's the basic. Then within the advanced, some of what you can do is actually create a whole new command center and its accompanying data sets and pages. You can build out custom security, you can create new tabs, you can extend your existing data set, whether that's Oracle or one that you already have in play that could be custom. And then you can create new drill down actions, and those drill down actions can either be to other areas within EBS or even to external systems and data sets. So I'm about to turn this over to Becky, but before I do, while we discussed basic and we discussed then advanced, because that's logically how you would necessarily think about them, Becky's actually going to present them in the reverse. And so take it away, Becky.
All right, thanks, Pam. All right, so as Pam mentioned, we're going to do advanced first. And the reason is some of the basic features that I'm going to show you have been set up on what I've already created in an advanced extension. So I didn't want you to see the basic on top of a page that I've never shown you before. So we're going to start with the big stuff, and then we'll close it out with some of the more basic features that we're going to leverage and show you today. And just a real quick follow, in addition to showing you the advanced and the basic, I am then also going to go through some of the features of extensions that are available to you, but I have not incorporated in this proof of concept, Sports R Us. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to see is we've created a brand new Command Center application with its associated data sets and pages. To demonstrate though, first I want you to see what a receivables application looks like as delivered from Oracle. So if you have laid down the patches and done the base configuration and you go into the setups, this is what you will see for the receivables application as delivered from Oracle. This first top box shows the application itself and its name. There's not much there. Secondly, over here are 6 associated data sets. And the data set is a group of data all related to the topic. So in this case, outstanding receivables and so on and so forth. Then the red blocks below are all the pages. And think of a page, and I'll show you what a page is when we get in, but think of a page like a main tab on top of your web browser. The pages and the data sets do not necessarily have a one-to-one correlation. They can, the way you build it. What you're trying to get with this construction of the pages is the best possible user interface for your end user. Okay, it's all about user experience and how the data is organized. A single page can have one or many data sets, and you'll see that in future examples. Now, if you look at this from a seated delivery out of the box from Oracle, you can then compare it to what we've done in our proof of concept for our royalty processing. I've created an application called Sports RS Royalties. This application has 2 pages. The first page is all related to the royalties setups. It says for this item, I pay this percentage to this supplier or licensor. The second page is all related to the history of the payments or invoices that are pending payment, so that I can, as a royalty processor, keep tabs on, do we have invoices that have royalties due and they haven't been paid yet. You know, this is all about keeping up to date with your royalty payments. Now, what's really important to note over here is I too have 6 data sets in my application. The 2 that start with XX are my custom data sets. I've got a custom data set for the rates and a data set for the royalty history. But what you also see are 4 more data sets that are Oracle seeded. So just because the data set is seeded to Oracle doesn't mean I can't use it in my application. Even more important here is the data sets are coming from multiple different modules, because as a royalty processor or manager of royalties, I need to see information about my items, which comes from Product Master. I need to see information from payables, which comes from our AP. And we've pulled in receivables transactions because, as Pam laid out in our scenario, every time we basically invoice a customer for a shirt, we then have to turn around and pay a royalty to 1 or more suppliers. Okay. So we end up here with our application and our 2 pages. And I'm going to go further into those pages after the next, in a couple of more slides. The next thing we did as part of this rollout was we have to create those tabs or pages, associate them to a responsibility, and then layer on top of it some custom security, and that's for segregation of duty purposes. In the screen print that's closer to you, you see the payables manager. And for those of you who are already using payables command centers, if there are any, this should look very familiar to you. If you lay down the patches for payables and you do the base configuration, you log into the EBS responsibility named payables manager or your version of it, navigate to the dashboard, you will see these 4 tabs. And Pam talked about those when she was talking about base functionality. If you look in the screenshot further behind it, you see this custom responsibility, XXI payables and royalties. So this group of users has access to all the basic stuff in payables, plus the royalty rates and the royalty history pages, okay? And that's where we get the segregation of duty between the users that are just normal payables users and the users who also have the responsibility of managing royalties. Okay, now we did this through a combination of EBS functions, responsibilities, and Pam, I think you alluded the role-based privileges. So with those three things, we can now create dashboards that are specific to a group of users. Okay. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to drive deeper into each one of these tabs to show the components that we've used to build these pages out in order to manage our royalties. So the first tab is the royalty rates. And as I mentioned earlier, royalty rates is all about, for this item, we pay X% to this supplier. Now this is might be a little bit hard to read, but you have on the top of this page, you have two different components and basically the same information, but I wanted to be able to demonstrate to you the different kinds of components. So in this first one, this royalty items, this is what is called a grid. And if you look closely, you can see that this item number that ends in 001, it's listed twice, and it's listed under two different suppliers. Well, that's because if I buy, this has got a style of glass, but if I buy maybe this pint mug or whatever it is, for this item, I pay Major League Baseball 0.29%. I also have to pay the brewers 1.05%. So I'm paying the same item to two different licensors because of the content or the logos that are on the item. Down below, what I'm seeing, there's that same item again listed twice, only this is in a component called a detail table. And that is now just showing a little bit the information in just a slightly different way. But now I can pretty easily see, because of my payment cycles, some get paid monthly, some get paid annually, some get paid quarterly. I can see and I can start slicing and dicing by my payment cycle, my rates. We are also required to pay minimums on an annual basis for this item. So we better be shipping these things and making some revenue on them. And then we also have due annual fees, and we're tracking what the minimums and the fees and the rates are. In addition, the last three elements on this table are just product attributes, whether something is available in an extended size, like t-shirts and sweatshirts and what have you, whether it's in an active marketing campaign, and what the style is. On the bottom half of this royalty rates page are then some graphs, and the first graph is showing me a basic bar graph, and it's giving me the number of items by supplier. So I can see Major League Baseball is by far my highest number of items in my inventory that I pay royalties on. In the bottom left chart, I can now also see, and this is just a standard pie, the number of items by annual minimum. So we talked about this annual minimum problem, right? I better be selling these things if I'm going to be paying, look at in this case, $100,000 annual minimum royalty for my items, and that's 24%. So that is obviously something we need to keep our thumb on and make sure that we're selling those items. The other graph, which is a donut, donuts are amazing. item count by annual fee. So now you can see how much how our annual fees are chunked up by a total of 90 items. Okay, so I've given you a little bit of a flavor of graphs, of grids, of results tables between the royalty rates. And now let me show you the royalty history. Okay, so here we are on the royalty history, and let me pause for a second. The royalty rates, the royalty history, and then these four. These are, if you recall from the application creation, these are the pages, okay? Within this page called royalty history are sub-tabs. These sub-tabs is actually a component. It's considered a layout component, and it's designed to be able to you can create as many tabs within the component as you need in order to break up the data. In this case, I created a tab group with two tabs, one with royalty invoices and payments, and the other with outstanding royalties. Then within this first tab, I've added three components. The first one is called a tag cloud. And this feature is designed to make the font bigger on the bigger number. So in this case, top royalty payees based on payments, we have paid Major League Soccer the most and Chicago Cubs the least. All right. In the bottom left corner, both of these components, left and right, are called aggregated tables. It's intended to sum and group your data that you've chosen. This first one tells us the top invoice royalties by supplier. In this case, we have been invoiced by the Packers, $1.23 billion, yes, billion dollars. That's some big numbers. But the top royalties paid out have gone to soccer. Now, I immediately see a disconnect here that says I've been invoiced, or I owe the Packers organization $1.23 billion, but in payments, I've only paid $137 million. Well, and that could be a couple of different reasons. Namely, I would have to go back and check the data, but the Packers might actually be someone that we pay annually, right? So maybe we start representing this data a little bit different so that we can show, okay, make sure you're only showing monthly dues in the invoiced and the monthly dues in the paid so that you can get a one-to-one correlation, because I would anticipate seeing much the same list, right? It's when you don't see the alignment that you think that there's something going on.
Becky, I'll interrupt there, because that's exactly what Pam said on her first slide. This is where you don't know the answer to your question.
Yeah.
So if you're doing this, you can drill in to what it says about the Green Bay Packers, and then it will, it will then give you that information to say, oh yes, it is, because we do it annually or whatever. So how was command centers help you answer the questions when you don't know what the question is.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Deborah.
Of that, yeah. Sorry.
Right. On the bottom half of that tab, we now have some graphs and some more tables. This is just a standard bar graph that is giving us amounts paid by payee and product style. So you can start to see here, and these are a little bit hard to read, my apologies, National Basketball Association. So the NBA, we have all these different products that we have paid against, right? So again, we're able to take any of the data that's in that data set, represent it in the type of visualization component that most makes sense for the end user base and their user experience. Then in the bottom half of that, unlike the tables at the top of the page, which were aggregated, these are details. So again, it's the invoices that have come in, invoice number, amounts, and so on and so forth. I've also pulled in that royalty rate. Then I have my payment history, okay? And that is, you know, by check number, I can tell when the payment went out and what the payment amount was. Again, in a detailed table, and this is called, this visualization component is called a results layout table. Okay, so now let's move on. The second tab that's in my tab container is now the outstanding royalties. This is where the receivables data being pulled into a payables dashboard is important, because what this is telling me is I have, maybe $16.5 million that I've invoiced my customer SmartBuy that I have yet to cut an AP invoice for. This is all outstanding royalties due. This says top 10, and it does show top 10, but one of the features of these graphs is your ability to zoom, which means I can use my mouse's scroll feature to zoom in and zoom out. I'm showing you the top 5. There are 5 more down below, but I wanted you to be able to get a good impact here. Okay, so that covers the details that we have laid out both on the royalty rates and the royalty history, with 2 tabs underneath royalty history. Also, just take note briefly that all the available refinements that you would have in a normal command center, we have built out as part of our application as well. We can tell it within this data set, these fields are available for refinement. And then you can start to refine your data, filter on it, sorting this. All of the features that you are used to having in your normal command centers as delivered from Oracle are features within our application here. Okay. The next thing I did was extend an existing data set. And there's a couple of really important things about this extension. What you're looking at is the as delivered organization items dashboard, and it's part of the product master solution. All of the tabs up until this red one, though, that's all standard Oracle stuff. You know, it's all of the attributes that you're used to seeing on the organization item related to planning and costing and WIP and order management and your revisions and all of the suppliers who are approved against this particular item and so on and so forth. We added this tab. Again, this should look familiar, right? This is a tab component. I was able to add a tab for our marketing details. And now you're starting to see that for this item, I am showing whether extended sizes is available, whether it's in an active marketing campaign, its product style, and the last time it was in an active catalog. This is what's really super important to understand here is this data is not inside my EBS. It is not inside of a flex field. It is not stored somewhere in some obscure table that is maintained inside of EBS. It's actually stored and maintained in a custom Apex application that we have built. And that application is used by our royalty processing team and our marketing team for maintaining the overall royalty solution, okay? Now, added to that then, I created a drill down on that same page. I just mentioned that these attributes are not in flex fields, they're in a custom application. you can see right here as an attribute, this item is blue, which means for the most part, a hyperlink. That hyperlink has a hover right here that says navigate to Apex, maintain marketing attributes data. When I click on that link, it then takes me to my custom application. And it's drilled me into that item number where I can then edit and maintain any of that item data. Right? So it's really important to understand that our data sets don't have to come from EBS. They can come from a plethora of locations as long as our enterprise command center can get to the data, we can absorb it into our data sets. Okay, now I'm going to go into some of the more basic stuff. I have done some basic extensions in a combination of the out of the box as delivered from Oracle and on top of our Sports R Us royalty application. The first thing that we've done is actually an out of the box. I went over to Receivables Manager and I went to the period close page, and you notice that in our summary, the unaccounted events is in red. What I've been able to do is just set up a real basic rule that says if unaccounted events is greater than 0, display it in red. This type of feature is available to any data attribute that is a metric. If it's just a word that's just a piece of data like a vision operations, I wouldn't be able to do anything with that. But if it's a metric, which is something that's been aggregated or calculated or formulated in some way, shape, or form, and within the data set, I've identified it as a metric, I can do this with. And it's intended to bring the end user's eye, oh, I've got an issue here. I need to address this. Okay, pretty simple to do. The next thing is we are going to hide and show some attributes available in a data set. So in this case, I'm in my custom responsibility. I am doing this for my royalties managers, but I'm on the out of the box supplier balance tab. And what I want to do is I want to hide or no longer show the bank account information. I want to insert a column, namely a supplier number. And because this is a tab group, I want to add a new tab. My intent is the paid invoices are all invoices. The paid royalties are just invoices, which are royalties. And there's lots of different ways to skin that cat, right? I mean, we can pull in a field into the paid invoices that shows, is this or is this not a royalty? And then add some filters and some refinements there. But we chose instead to add a whole new tab, so that the moment that you navigate to the tab, all you're seeing is royalties. Okay, the end result is the bank account field is gone. The supplier number exists. And we have a new tab called paid royalties. And now the only, it's, my apologies, the only, oh, sorry, hold on. So it's all the same data as paid. It's just, I'm only seeing royalty payments. Okay. All right, now I want to remove existing or add new components. Here, I'm over on the Payables Manager Command Center. And in the supplier balance, where I've added a red line, I want to create a new graph. That graph is royalty data. And just because our Payables Manager isn't responsible for managing the royalties, doesn't mean that they don't need to know about the royalties. So I'm taking an advantage here of adding, I'll add a graph with royalty information. I am going to remove the tag cloud. Not an uncommon ask for my end users. Somehow the big words tend to be too in their face. So that's not an uncommon ask. And then I'm going to add a new metric to my summary line, right? End result, I have my new metric. On Payables Manager, I have the royalties total invoice amount by supplier. And you'll notice that the tag cloud is now gone. Okay. Pam alluded earlier that we've got a segregation of duty here and that removing actions and links is an option. Now, as the Payables and Royalty Manager group of users, yes, they're responsible for making sure that royalties get paid, but they're not necessarily the ones running payments. In a normal out-of-the-box as delivered from Oracle, and it's very common, whether it's in payables, receivables, all kinds of order management, they always give you the key number, right? And there will be it's a link, and it allows you to navigate directly to the workbench from the command center. For the royalty group, we want to remove that functionality. So just like that, you can see now it's no longer blue, it's no longer a hyperlink, and now it's just data. Also a very simple thing to do. And again, because this is all part of just the payables and the royalties, that's how we can do this for the royalty groups of users without doing it to the normal payables users. Okay. Okay, so that wraps up Sports R Us with royalty processing. The additional extensions that I'm gonna show you a few and then just speak to a few, and then I'll be in a wrap up mode. These are, I thought these were important to talk about because they are features, but I wasn't able to really integrate them in part of our proof of concept. Namely because the version of our command center, Pam talked about the versions of the command center. I think we're somewhere around version 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And some of these features, when the versions come out twice a year, you know, yes, they create new command centers. Yes, they create new dashboards. Yes, they create all kinds of end user specific pre-builts, but they also tend to add new features or new visualization components that we can use in our own pages. So these were not available necessarily in our version. This one is just a waterfall graph, cumulative effect over time. We do have a scattered chart available in our version. They've now offered the same thing only in bubble version. This is actually pretty cool. This is what's known as a timeline, and it's events of things that have happened in chronological order. You can see weekly buckets down below. In this case, it's talking about work orders that are scheduled to start in different weeks. And this is very clearly something coming from the work in process command center. The pivot view is new. No explanation needed. If Excel is near and dear to your heart and you run half of your business on Excel, the part that you don't run on EBS, you're close with pivots. So Oracle has provided us now with pivots. This one I wanted to show you. Now I do have this functionality in my version. This is the grid. And if you remember a handful of slides back when I showed you the items and the marketing attributes and they were in a grid form, this allows you to also show an image of it. Really common with item maintenance grids as well. And this example is assets. So the assets dashboard is pretty flashy. If you're capturing pictures of your assets, you've got hyperlinks in here that are going to take you places. This is a pretty flashy grid, and that functionality is in there for you to extend as well. Same thing here, obviously not flashy, but a grid. And this is called an aggregated grid. And what this is now showing is it's aggregating the total customers with open balances. In this case, business rentals has $114 million open receivables balance. But it's just a different way to represent. And this final picture is called a diagram. And it is basically a process flow. It looks like a Visio, but really what it is it represents a process flow of data that's contained inside of other data. For example, really common in manufacturing environments, whether, automotive, pharmaceutical, things like that, where a lot or serial number genealogy, you need to be able to represent how the whole thing was built. Recalls gets really important. This is important for recalls. Another place that you'll see this used in the command centers are like bills of material for the structure of something that you manufacture. Okay. So these are available in the newer releases of the command centers. Okay, no fancy pictures, but there are 3 more features I want to talk about, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pam. Pop-ups. Oracle is starting to, they're not there. All of you are familiar with the Java forms that are blue or pink or green or whatever. They're starting to move. I'm seeing with every EBS release, I'm seeing more and more web page transaction pages. If you have something tied to your command center that can be accessed via a web page rather than a Java form, the pop-up allows you to click on the link, the hyperlink. It'll pop up a dialog box where you can maintain that transaction in real time. Okay? A drawer. If you think of it like a filing cabinet, it's intended that when you click on the drawer handle, it will slide open additional information. So think about if your main command center component is at a summary level, let's say it's item number level, and you click on the drawer handle, it's going to slide out and it can give you all the details. So you don't lose your context in place. You're still held onto that item as soon as you close that drawer, and you're back to right where you started without losing any of the context. And then the last feature is an inline view. And similar to a drawer, it is, rather than a drawer that slides out, it's really just a page overlay, so that when you click on that item, it can pop up and then show you all the details. You can look at it, make decisions, whatever you need to do, close it, and you're right back to where you left off. Okay? So those are all worthy extensions that I was not able to pull into my proof of concept, but I thought they were important for you to know as features. So with that, Pam is going to tell us everything that we learned.
In a lot shorter time.
Yeah.
So what did we learn today? Well, first we had the brief introduction of ECC, the standard capabilities of it, and how it can really help your business to run bigger, better, faster. And then we went into the advanced features that are available, some of those, and then some of the basic. And then, of course, Becky just closed out with the additional extensions. So with that, I'm going to ask Marissa, do we have any questions?
We did get a couple of questions, ladies. And before I go ahead and start with the ones that we have already received, I'm just going to remind everyone that if you have any questions that popped up throughout the session, go ahead and submit those into the questions box now, and we will have Pam and Becky answer those for us. So the first question that we got was, I implemented ECC a few years ago and didn't know that I could extend. Is that availability only available from a certain release?
And I think I'll answer that, Pam, sorry. I did allude that the different kinds of components are being released as the versions of the command centers become available. So going all the way back to the beginning, you have always had this ability, 100%. It's just the types of components have gotten newer and flashier as the time has gone by. So depending on what version you're on will depend on what components are available to you. But you can have always had the ability to create the application and create those new data sets.
So I heard that question slightly different. Okay, I thought they were saying, do I need to be on a certain version of EBS? But Pam, you talked about that in your part, where you said actually it's backwards and forwards. They are independent,
Right.
independent versions. So if they did this when they were at 12.2.1 or 12.2.4 when it first came out, they don't have to be on a higher version of Oracle now. They can just do the patches to get the latest version of ECC.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Great, thank you guys. Our next question was, what is the typical system requirement?
Typical system requirement in terms of, I mean, the environment is, and Becky, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but ECC kind of sits with your EBS environment. So I'm not sure if you have to be on the exact same system as far as
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if the question is the requirement to be able to extend or the requirement to just install in the first place. The ECC has a architecture whereby there is a separate server that is intended to ingest the data from EBS or from any other data source, all right? And then that server then also has a presentation layer. There is a sizing guide available from Oracle because it obviously depends on whether you're heavy in transactions or lower in transactions, about how much power that server needs. But as far as then extensions go, once your ECC is installed and configured, there's no additional requirement other than you just need to be able to access the data from wherever you're ingesting it from, if it happens to be a location other than EBS.
So as Becky said, there is a sizing guide from Oracle, and it's really, if you think about, so what ECC does is it takes those data sets that you're using. So if you think about the ones we saw, there were like 5 or 6 in payables. So if you're just installing payables ECC, there's a small overhead for the presentation layer, etc. But what's really going on is those data sets are sitting in an in-memory database, or that information indexing or something. It's, you know, basically that data is being aggregated and stored for you, so that which you have to refresh, which enables you to get that information into the dashboard. So that sizing guide will help you determine what you need for that server. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, and they did submit a follow-up clarifying question as well, saying what are the typical system requirements to install? Like, do I need a VM?
Okay, so I think this goes on to another question that I've seen in there, which is around, you know, where do I store it? Okay, if you're using, if you're on cloud and you're using VMs, then yes, you need a separate one. Okay, I'll just answer that other question while I'm here. Can you do? The other question is, can I run my ECC on something like Oracle Cloud Infrastructure if I'm still running my EBS on bare metal in my data center? And the answer is technically yes, but you wouldn't want to do that. They need to be not necessarily side by side physically, but they need to be in the same place. Otherwise, you're going to get latency issues. Okay, so if you're doing it in the cloud, yes, you will need another VM to run that in. If you're doing it on bare metal, then you would want to put it perhaps on the same server, but it's got to be close to it, otherwise you're going to get latency for the data.
Okay, great, Deborah. Thank you. I appreciate you killing two birds with one stone there, so to speak, with the questions. So the next question that we got is there a limitation on the data volume in ECC and sizing requirements to avoid slower performance?
So in addition to having that sizing guide that we mentioned, there's not a limitation, but especially when you do initial loads, which is think of, you do the initial is all of the data that you want to make available to ECC, and then you do incremental loads. There can be times, depending on just the size of, volume of transactions and the size of your current EBS environment, that can take hours. I think, Becky, you've seen sometimes it will be over a day anyway.
Yeah, with some really extreme high volumes, the first load requires some patience.
Right.
But the incrementals run pretty quickly.
Yes.
And as far as performance of the command centers themselves, the data is not ingested into a physical database. Deborah mentioned it's in memory. It's pretty efficiently built. It is not hard data inside of a table.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just keeping my eye on the clock here. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. We do have quite a few additional questions, but I'm going to make this the last one that we answer on the session. And then if you had a question that we did not get to, please know that we will follow up with you after the session to give you a response to that question.
Definitely.
So the next question was how to retain personalization and customizations during ECC upgrades. Do we have to start from scratch if we have customizations made to seeded page?
No, you're going to be protected. But one of the things that's key is, and I didn't go into that here, is you have export and import capabilities so that you can use that in your migration. There's another really important feature that I always export before I start messing with a page, because while when you're tweaking the page, it gives you a preview functionality, but if you don't use the preview and as soon as you hit save, there's no undo. And I learned this from experience, sadly, learn from my errors. But the import export becomes really, really critical. The dashboards themselves do not change. They're protected just like personalization would be in Oracle, in the EBS.
Great, thank you, Becky. I appreciate that. And again, if you have any additional questions or if we did not answer your question, please know that we will follow up with you after the session to provide those answers. Becky, if you could flip to the next slide.
You bet I can.
Thank you. And for any additional questions that you would like us to answer for you, or if you would like to have a one-on-one conversation with us about ECC, how to implement it, or how to set it up best for your business, please feel free to use the contact information we have here. If you could flip one more, there we go. Thank you, Becky. If you feel free to use the contact information listed here to reach out to us. And if you'll be at Cloud World in a couple of weeks, be sure to stop by booth 25 to meet our team. We would love to speak with you there as well. At this time, I want to thank you all again for joining our session today. I hope you got a lot of value out of it and have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.